Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. This is where, obviously, myself and my wonderful friend Ralphie will be talking to you about some of the week's more interesting, bits of news. I almost dread. I almost dread to think, like, every week seems to get even more dramatic than the last. You think, surely nothing else can happen. However, this week it did. So this week, in today's edition, we're going to talk about Truss, what happened there, the long-term effects. Secondly, we're going to be talking windfall taxes and other taxes. And then the third thing, we're going to be talking about the death of electric vehicle manufacturing in the UK. So there you go. Drama times 3. So starting off with the first one, Truss. We said it last time. We said she wouldn't last a week. We were wrong. She lasted for less than a week. She lasted not long into the week. It was a disaster. So many kind of digs and things on social media about the whole thing. I suspect that British comedians will be. They will have so much material to go for the next few months. If only this had happened in July, the Edinburgh Festival would have been absolutely sorted. But anyway. So what do you make of the whole drama then, Ralph?
I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing. If it wasn't so tragic, really, I'm torn between laughing and weeping.
Yes.
The first thing which occurred to me is that PM is now another unit of measure. It now stands for time. We now have like we have seconds and hours.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have chancellors, which is by basically lasting a second, and we have PMs, which is maybe roughly a month or so.
Yes.
In fact, I was saying to you last week that she might not survive the weekend. In fact, by that measure, she did a good job. She lasted until Wednesday lunchtime. But the Daily Star lettuce has still outlived her, and looking quite solid there.
That was a genius. That was a genius thing, wasn't it? As a quick aside, I don't know if you know this. I've forgotten what I've said to anyone else as well, but when I did a previous version of Watson's Daily, so it used to be called Watson's Wi-Fi when I first started, and I did a web TV show for day traders, and I managed to predict the outcome of the referendum, the referendum, using a cucumber. Did I tell you that?
No.
So basically, I was on this TV show, and I got this cucumber, and I got a piece of paper saying in or out, and I spun the cucumber, and interestingly, it went to exit, but only just slightly. So actually,
really?
not only was the cucumber right in terms of the actual in terms of the which way it went, but also by degree as well. So anyway, so I think definitely there is a space for using vegetables or sort of salad ingredients generally for predicting political outcomes.
Indeed, we could just make a cucumber our next prime minister. He would he or she, I don't know what gender a cucumber has, but they, let's say, would probably be more
on LinkedIn, cucumber. They, in brackets.
They.
Anyway,
they would be more predictive and more sensible, predictive of future outcome, and more sensible in the implementation of policies than our outgoing lettuce, which is Liz Truss. No, well, what do I make of it?
Let's reflect on that.
Oh my God, oh dear. Anyway, what do I make of it? Well, the world doesn't need me to add to general invective and and horrible statements about this. I am just aghast, just like anybody else. What I have said on this program many times is that I regard Liz Truss as an ideologue. I might have said a vacuous ideologue, and I think we have now seen that this is true, because basically what she did is she just implemented policies which she thought were in line with tried and tested, cliched conservative policies, meaning conservatives never increase taxes, they always reduce taxes. And obviously, we've seen the impact on the expected future inflation, commensurately interest rates, and the markets responded. Where we are now is, and I was wrong last time. I did think that there was only one way in which this could be done, and go through another hustings, etc. process, which is far better that this is actually not the case, and we will know who our new prime minister is by the end of next week, I believe. Now, there appear to be really only two people in the running. One is Rishi Sunak, and it appears that Boris Johnson has now garnered 100 people in support. I've just seen that as a news flash, which in itself is, unfortunately, I have to say, it's embarrassing and farcical that a conservative party who 6-8 weeks ago has explicitly said this man is unfit for office. We, the Conservative Party, regard Boris Johnson as unfit to lead the country. That's not my interpretation. That is what they have said. 8 weeks on, they're saying, "Ooh, he was pretty cool, really." In the end, I mean, let's give him another shot at this.
Yeah.
So I mean,
the naughty tinker. You know, he likes a bit of a party, but who doesn't, eh?
Hey.
You know, yeah.
So
agreed.
So there is only one sensible person here. If Rishi Sunak this time makes it, I believe that the impact of that will be positive. It will be positive on the economy. I mean, he's going to do things which people do not wish to see. This is already being implemented. Jeremy Hunt has basically reversed all of the various policies decisions made by Liz Truss, and I think this is for the best, because we need to get away from the inflation spiral. Nobody can afford 7% mortgage rates, and it now is looking as if we're not going to get this. But we're still going to get 5 to 6% mortgage rates, so we need somebody who is going to be able to implement wiser policy decisions, and that's not going to be Boris Johnson, that's going to be Rishi Sunak. By extension, I also think that Rishi Sunak has a better reputation as a sensible, reasonable man outside of the UK. And although I personally do not really care for things like patriotism, or whether we are the laughing stock, which is currently something which is suggested. I mean, whether we are, whether we don't, whether we're not, I don't know. And also I wouldn't really care. What I do care about is whether outside businesses see the UK as an attractive place to do business. And with Boris Johnson coming back in again, I'm afraid that would do further damage to the reputation of the UK as a place to do business. So again, my vote would go for Rishi Sunak. If he gets in, I think the situation might be, well, perhaps not exactly salvageable, but we are going to head into a period where the crisis can at least be addressed rather than fueled further.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that I would say the city and the sorry, not the city. Oh, yeah, the markets and the broader, you know, yeah, I'm trying to think of the phrase now, but you know, the broader sort of political world, you know, all the leaders. I think that they will, you know, Sunak would be their preferred candidate. As in, I think if he became leader, markets wouldn't tank. You know, I think that they would either, you know, it depends what everything else is going on as well. But I would have thought that he would be the one that would make least least waves in the market. I think because he's a known quantity. He's been he's battle hardened through some very tough years, and people take him seriously. So I think that's good. Penny Mordaunt, I don't think it doesn't have that experience, not as much of that kind of experience. So I'd be surprised if she did. It'd be interesting, but I'd be very surprised. I mean, like I say, I think Sunak would be the preferred candidate.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would be surprised if Mordaunt even gets the threshold sorted of 100 MP support. So far, I haven't seen that she might. She's still below 50, I think, and I don't think she's a known quantity outside of Whitehall. Inside of Whitehall, she's well known. I have to say I don't really know that much about her. I wonder, having seen her brief performance as leader of the House when Liz Truss was reportedly not hiding underneath the desk. Guys, you may know this. I mean, she was being asked the question: is Liz Truss hiding underneath the desk because Liz Truss wasn't there? And Mordaunt repeated that and denied it. Well, that's basically the cardinal sin in terms of PR, because you give the press a soundbite. Now, that in itself doesn't disqualify you as Prime Minister, of course, but it does show that she is untested and perhaps still a little bit naive in the way in which she communicates with the public. Of course, that can be learned, but I believe that Rishi Sunak is definitely my first choice, and I would hope that the majority of MPs remember what he said in the hustings, that we are going to get to 7% interest rates if Liz Truss's policies are being implemented. They were implemented, and we did. So there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually going back to one of your other points about, the long-term damage in terms of reputation, etc. Again, I agree with you. I think that, I don't think it's neither here nor there in really. But I think that, and actually, what you were saying about our business is going to see the UK as a serious place to do business. I still think they will. The reputation we have is built on a very long period of time. Also, I imagine that the weak pound is not going to hurt either. That's certainly going to make things easier. I think the other thing is that they've got their own stuff to deal with at the moment. I mean, we're all in an energy crisis. We're all seeing inflation going through the roof. So, I mean, I think this is Truss's leadership has been effectively a comedy interlude, and then back to the serious stuff, really.
Yeah, I mean,
But anyway.
Yeah. These points are difficult to evaluate, but after Brexit, the pound, of course, devalued against other currencies. And yes, in theory, that should have been actually positive for exports, but it hasn't been. You see, this is the interesting thing. If you now look at the economic data, you can clearly see the pandemic effect, and you can clearly see the trading volumes of countries after the pandemic. As Europe is coming out of the pandemic, pretty much every European country is seeing an increase in trading volumes. Guess which one isn't? Yes, it's the UK, and that is absolutely a Brexit effect. This is not just me speaking, but you guys, I apologize, but now you know that I do think that Brexit was the biggest folly this country has committed since the Second World War. But this is not just me speaking. These are economists. Basically, everybody says that. And you can now, not that it was the greatest folly. Everybody says that the fact that we are not seeing trading volumes increase after the pandemic, that is a Brexit effect. And so if we're thinking about longer term issues, I think the longer term sustainable damage that has been done was through Brexit. And of course, in that regard, we need to remember that Rishi Sunak is also a supporter of Brexit. It's not as if the man, in my view and my economic assessment, is the panacea of all good economic sense necessarily. But I believe he is the right person at the right time now.
Yeah, fair enough. So obviously we'll see soon enough how things work out. So let's move on to the next thing, windfall taxes. So I mean, this week there was a lot of chat. I mean, obviously we've seen recently windfall taxes on energy companies, oil and gas companies and things. And there's also a lot of talk that maybe the banks are going to be put under focus by Jeremy Hunt, who's looking to plug a massive fiscal hole. And the thing is that, traditionally banks do well in an environment where interest rates are going up, because, again, very, very crudely put, it just means that they can have a bigger gap between what they charge, what they charge borrowers versus what they can give out to savers. That they just have more scope, and in current circumstances they don't really want to be shouting too much about that, but even so, Jeremy Hunt is obviously sniffing on opportunity here, and of course the optics aren't going to be too harmful to him either, because if he just says, well, bankers bonuses, you hate bankers, therefore, look, we're going to get a windfall tax from them. I think that would, that should play to the gallery to an extent as well. So that's quite interesting. But again, what do you make of these windfall taxes?
Well, quite. I mean, I dislike windfall taxes, of course, in general, but we are in a difficult period. Obviously, everybody knows this, and we need to implement. Or let's put it this way: the Conservative Party knows that they need to implement some policies which are going to go some way towards narrowing the budgetary deficit. And the budgetary deficit is, if anything, is going to grow, not come down if you don't do anything. And sometimes when I see the press coverage analyzing Jeremy Hunt's various policy decisions, I hear things like the reversion on the 45% top tax bracket, abolishment. It's hard to know. This is the U-turns again going on. So that's going to save 5 billion, and then other things are going to save this. Well, they're not going to save anything, because that's just saving it relative to a disastrous situation which Liz Truss would have caused. All that does is it just means that it's not going to get worse than it was before. So in order to address the budgetary deficit, we need to do other things. What Jeremy Hunt has done is he avoided a deterioration, but he needs to do something explicit, something new, in order to plug the budgetary deficit. And so therefore, I don't think there's much choice. I would think that windfall taxes on the banking sector is one possibility. I have said before, we said this before, windfall taxes on some selected energy companies is another possibility. And then there are very difficult things which one might think about, and these are wealth taxes. Let's just remember that was mooted under Boris Johnson, but then was sort of forgotten about, or we never really heard about this again. Now, wealth tax is something like a council tax, for example. You pay council tax based on the deemed value of your property, and that is a wealth tax because you need to find cash valued on something which you own. And so, in other words, if you say you own a house which is worth £10 million, and then you have to pay, let's say, £50,000 on that. This is presumably fine, you would think, because a person who is as wealthy as that will easily find £50,000 somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But this is in fact not always the case. I mean, £10 million is of course now an invented example. But let's say you have somebody who has £1 million house. That's not as rare as it sounds, maybe, if you live in London. And maybe this property was inherited. And so maybe you have a perfect normal person sitting in this type of property. You don't have much revenues. Maybe you're a pensioner. And then all of a sudden you're being asked to stump up, let's say, £5,000, £10,000, which you simply do not have. So in other words, wealth taxes sound good. And in principle, they are, I think, a possibility. But if we are going to implement wealth taxes, we need to think very hard about how to do that in a socially responsible way, I think.
No, absolutely. Yeah, agreed. So yes, I mean, I think that there's going to be a lot of things. There's going to be a lot of things that need to be done that sound right. But then again, yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to. It can be harder to actually implement them. I mean, one of the things which we did touch on before, and which I saw again this week in the FT, which I think is very true, is that one of the good things that's come out about this whole Truss sort of debacle is that although I, as a customer, welcomed the idea of having a sort of guarantee on the energy bills for the next 2 years, in reality, if I were to stand back and look at this objectively, that's a big commitment in terms of money. And it may well be that, I mean, there was talk of everyone getting something, and then there would be like a means tested element or something like that.
Yes.
And I remember we were saying, it does seem somewhat ridiculous that you're just giving everyone something, because there will be a lot of people out there who can easily afford it and they don't mind. Whereas, but you're still giving them money, which is money that, say, someone who really needs it is going to be deprived of. So it's good that it's going to be means tested. That the fact that it's not going to be guaranteed for 2 years is also good from the finances point of view. But it does mean, as a consumer, it does prolong the worry, because you just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, if it's that bad, I'm sure that it will get. I really would be very surprised if it doesn't get extended. But yeah, we'll just have to see.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, let's talk about cars, and which I'm trying to be chirpy here, but it's all rather depressing. So really, what I'm trying to say here is it just occurs to me that maybe 6 months, maybe a year ago, there was a lot of talk about the UK trying to be at the forefront of electric vehicle manufacturing and batteries and things like that, because the car industry globally is shrinking, and again, another thing of Brexit, of course, is that that having manufacturing here versus versus Europe can be problematic. But anyway, it just seems to me there are a lot of stories this week that come together that sort of imply that maybe we really aren't going to be at the forefront of all this. So you've got a British Volt, which it has that factory up in Northumberland in all sorts of financial chaos. So we don't know what's happening with that. So that's the battery front. But also BMW took the decision to say that they're not going to keep manufacturing the electric Mini here. Next year they're going to manufacture it in China instead. And then there was another thing sort of later on in the week where Arrival, which is sort of ostensibly a British startup, although the person that started up is Russian but came here and it floated in America. But anyway, that aside, it's a bit like the Andy Murray, right? Andy Murray playing tennis. When he was playing well, it was always British, and when he was playing badly, he was Scottish, right? So, I mean, Arrival, is it British? Is it not? Anyway, very sad in that they had what I thought was a very interesting business model in that they were not going for the gigafactory option. They were going for having smaller, localized factories around the country so that they would be nearer to their customers, which I thought sounded great. But they've decided to, I think they're cutting the production of buses and cars and just concentrating on vans, and they're just going to go to America. Loads of people are going to lose their job over here. So it's very sad, and it would suggest to me that we're not really going to be at the forefront at all when it comes to electric vehicles. Who knows? Maybe things will turn around, but at the moment, it's not looking good. What do you reckon?
Well, indeed, unfortunately, this is the case. I mean, I don't look behind exactly the detail of the nature of these decisions, of course, but I would believe that Brexit at least facilitates decisions of this nature. Because if you, for example, look at the decision of BMW to relocate the manufacturing of the electric Mini to China, I think the plan is to manufacture these in China and then export them globally. Now, that would have been possible to do from the UK very easily when the UK was still in the European Union. Now that the UK is outside of the European Union, it is certainly not easier to export something from the UK into Europe. And therefore, it doesn't really matter anymore from that point of view whether you manufacture something in the UK or, for example, in China, if you're still following this. I mean, when the UK was still in the EU, you could have said, well, okay, China, there is lower cost, that's good, but from the UK we can export into probably one of the three large automotive markets in the world, which is Europe. With that possibility now either gone or certainly moderated, other alternative countries become more attractive to attract that sort of level of manufacturing. And so this is what worries me slightly, that we are going to see the long-term effects of Brexit coming to the fore now as we're coming out of the pandemic. And eventually, one would hope, as this current crisis abates, we're going to see more and more of this type of stuff, of these type of decisions. Yes, this is particularly galling because these are not turn of the century industries. These are future industries. This is what the future is going to be all about. It's going to be electric vehicles, battery manufacturing, and other technologies which are going to be leading the way into the future. And you would want, as a country, to attract a large chunk, or at least some of it, into your territory. So yeah,
absolutely.
I hope that's not too gloomy a context. I think it's got something to do with that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it is tricky for sure. So I thought maybe we could just finish maybe on a slightly more positive note. One of my favourite stories this week, what I really liked, was this thing about Foxconn, which is famous for assembling Apple, iPhones, moving into vehicle manufacture, or partly vehicle, because they're not going to make their own full car. It sounds to me like they're going to make something like a base or something, maybe platform or something. But anyway, the idea is they're going to be able to make them at scale. They've already signed up some small, motor manufacturers, and the idea is, they've got very big designs over the next few years to take a big chunk of the world's market share. So why do I think this is interesting? Well, I think this is interesting because for a few reasons. One is the fact that it's a consumer electronics manufacturer, assembler. It's the biggest one in the world, and it's deciding to do something that is very, very expensive and difficult to do. However, I think if anyone can do it, they can, and clearly they are very good at designing processes that work. It's also interesting because all of the sort of facilities are not in China. So this also is interesting because you kind of think, well, maybe this is quite a defensive move, because if their contract electronics manufacturing has got China in it, that makes it problematic. So maybe earnings from this new business could really help to balance things out. And, I think that this will be great for auto manufacturers as well, because it means that they'll be able to lower their prices. So if Foxconn can make all these things at a reasonable price, that gives the motor manufacturers more scope to lower their prices should they want to. And so I think that's really good as well. And for Foxconn long term, although it says that it doesn't want to make its own car, I think that it can piggyback off the reputation of companies like, if let's say it signs up VW, Ford, and all the rest of them, and Stellantis and things, then actually over the years, assuming that things go okay, people will respond and think that, realize that Foxconn is making this, so that if they ever should decide in the future to make their own car, then they can, and they won't have to go through the years and years and years and years and years of reputation building that, say, Tesla has had to do, or any other kind of new manufacturer. So anyway, what do you think of that? I mean, it's an unusual one.
I find it very interesting and quite unusual. I don't know exactly about the car manufacturing potential of this move. If there is one, it would be in the more distant future, I believe. But it's certainly interesting that Foxconn is identifying an opportunity to leverage their proven and tested expertise in the manufacture of electronic components, and position themselves in one of the obviously or arguably most potentially growing markets in the world where these products are being used, which is vehicles, specifically electric vehicles. So I think the move is very interesting. The projection, I think Foxconn itself expects something like 5% market share by reasonably quickly, by 2025, I've heard, or 2020, I believe that's right, or 2028 perhaps, I don't know. But anyway, that would be a reasonably quick glide path towards establishing a meaningful market share globally. And the idea is to actually get 50%, one half of the entire world market. I mean, these type of growth projections, I think always have to be taken with a pinch of salt. But if we just run with this, then obviously it would be very interesting for Foxconn to do. But at that level, I would maybe have to introduce a maybe more sobering thought. I don't think it is ever good for world markets if the majority of a key component is being sourced just from one manufacturer in one particular territory. Because obviously it's Taiwan, and there is some political risk there, as we all know. But even if there wasn't any political risk, there is, of course, always corporate risk. I mean, the company might disappear, it might make silly decisions, and then what you have is 50% of the supply of electronic components in a key market of the future is going to disappear. Now, none of that is necessarily going to happen. 50% is their forecast, their projection, their ambitious target. But I think before we get there, it's going to be a very interesting move for Foxconn, and is probably going to have exactly the the consequences in terms of economies of scale, which you outlined. And so let's see where we go with this. But I think in the more immediate future, if 2028 is the more immediate future, I think it can be seen as immediate. I think it's a very interesting move, and it will certainly be good for the development of the electric vehicle industry, albeit it won't be fueled much by the UK, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. So there we go on that. I mean, it was very difficult to try and end on a positive note.
Oh, I'm sorry, I mucked it up, did I?
No, it's sort of, yes, well, no, not really. It's all right. But anyway, yeah, so very difficult times, very interesting times, but yeah, we're right in the middle of it at the moment. So hopefully helping you to navigate through these stormy waters. So I mean, I guess on that note, we shall end this week. But as always, Ralph, thank you very much indeed for being on here, and we bid you a goodbye and see you next time. Many
Absolutely, thanks. Always a pleasure, always good fun. Thank you very much for having me.
All
Thanks,
right,
guys.
See ya. Bye.